2020 is the year of roguelites. There's Hades, Spelunky 2, Star Renegades, Noita, the Early Access Rogue Legacy 2, and several others in the Steam store. Roguelites have typically been seen as somewhat of a niche genre, but these games are pretty different and cater to different audiences. So what is going on and what is the reason for this surge? Is it purely coincidental or has something changed within the genre? I'm Blitzen Cross, and today I'm taking a look at roguelites. The roguelite concept is pretty simple. Roguelites are built to support the repetition of content. Instead of making a 50-hour long linear adventure, you can just make 3 or 4 maps, and then you can make the player repeat them ad nauseum. To enable this repetition, the roguelites of today do 3 things. 1. They make death permanent. If you die, the run ends and you start over. 2. They make each run different. This is achieved either through procedural generation or by giving you options to pick from within the run, or sometimes both. And 3, they provide a sense of progression between runs, either through really hard demanding mechanics that you're asked to master, or power-ups between runs, or both. And that is it. Now this list is very interesting because of how unrestrictive it is. Traditionally, roguelites have been and have seemed to be tied to this archetype of games that are really hard and unforgiving and are light on story, and they're only meant for one particular audience. But indeed, roguelites don't have to cater to hardcore audiences. I've talked about Hades in a previous video, but this game is all about the story, despite being a roguelite. In fact, it is the roguelite core principle of permanent death that enables Hades to be what it is, since the game is based on the concept of death. It also features an easy mode, which is very unusual for your typical roguelite, but is also a thing that any roguelite can do based on the concept. Indeed, most roguelites, including Hades, feature unlockables that make the game easier as you progress. So it seems that instead of delivering an experience tailored to hardcore players, what roguelites can do is make a hard experience enjoyable, even if you're not down to be frustrated or just don't like hard games. And what this also means is that roguelites aren't tied to any secondary genre. Just like Hades proves that a roguelite can have a good story, Star Renegades proves that you can have a good RPG tactics game with roguelite mechanics. And the integration can be seamless. In fact, you can attach almost any genre to the roguelite base, 3D platformer, racing game, whatever, and it'll just work. It might require a bit of creativity, but it'll work. And now you'll notice that throughout this video so far, I haven't talked about roguelikes, only roguelites. And that's part of the reason you see this flexibility. So roguelike is a more restrictive word. In the very beginning, roguelike meant games like Rogue, a 1980 fantasy dungeon crawler that featured permanent death and procedural generation. The term roguelite evolved because games were developed that were sort of roguelikes, but were less like Rogue. They weren't dungeon crawlers, RPGs, or even in fantasy environments. Spelunky, The Binding of Isaac, Rogue Legacy. These games came around over the years, and some of them were termed roguelites instead of roguelikes. So roguelite is essentially the roguelike genre, but with half of the elements stripped away, which makes it fairly flexible. Roguelite as a concept allows the developer to focus on the player's mastery of mechanics and progression without too much detailed level design, and this approach can really be applied to any genre. So this is kind of how roguelite split off from roguelike. Roguelike is a very specific niche genre, but roguelite is proving to be less of a genre and more of a game design philosophy, a methodology for steering away from curated content. So yes, absolutely roguelites are evolving, because people are realizing that procedural generation and permanent death don't have to be attached to a certain model of game. About Hades, you'll hear many people saying, "I don't like roguelites, but I love Hades." But going forward, it's going to be really hard to say the word, "I don't like roguelites," because a roguelite could be anything. It's about as broad as the term RPG, or even broader than that. And I can't wait to see what the genre has in store for the future. I'm Blitzen Cross, signing out for today. I'll see you next time.